Welcome to the NATS Vocal Chat, the Vocal Wellness blog for August 2017. This month, because we're going back to school, we wanted to talk a little bit about what some of the most important vocal wellness issues are for students and for teachers. So what I did is I asked some of my teacher colleagues at Cincinnati Conservatory what some of their biggest wellness concerns were for their students as they come back into the school year. And across the board, one of the biggest things people mentioned was vocal pacing. How do they teach their students to appropriately vocally pace themselves so that they don't burn out vocally? So I'm going to break this down into several age groups because I think that the pacing issues for high school students are different than for college students, and are different for my voice teachers, because my singing voice teachers also really need to think about pacing themselves, especially if they maintain performing careers. So let's back up and let's start with some of the vocal pacing concerns with high school students. I think that if you teach high school students, one of the things we really need to think about is that these students are in their developmental phase. So the skill set that they develop now as singers is going to carry through with them into their college years, hopefully, and for a lifetime. So if we teach them how to appropriately vocally pace themselves, they're going to be able to carry that into their later years. So what exactly does vocal pacing mean? When we think about vocal pacing, it's the ability for a singer to control both the duration of time that they sing as well as their vocal load. By vocal load, I'm talking about intensity, like how loud you are, and range. So for example, you are likely able to sing in a softer dynamic for a longer period of time in your mid to low range. Singing loud and high is going to have a toll on the system much more quickly than at a medium or soft dynamic. So you want to think about that when we talk about pacing. High school students generally also don't have a lot of filter, so their perception of how loud they are and how long they talk or sing is huge. So you need to help them monitor their loudness, both in their speaking voice and their singing voice. One of the things that I encourage my singing voice teachers to do at the beginning of their semester, when they think about setting up parameters for their studio and how singers are going to practice and how singers are going to sing outside of the studio, you want to ask them how long they sing, and that can include in the shower, in the car, are they singing all the time? And of that time that they're singing, how much of that time is actually spent practicing what you do in lessons? Ideally, for a high school singer, probably somewhere between 15 to 45 minutes per day, 5 days per week, is ideal for personal practice time. By that, I'm talking about technique, things you're working on in your lesson, language, etc. As we get older, that duration of time for daily practice is going to increase. Just like training for any physical event, the other thing that becomes important is that you take days of rest. So I don't need complete vocal rest, but what you do need to think about is that if you have a vocally intense day, the next day that you sing is either an easier vocal day or that it's a day of rest, because you want to think about training like you train for a marathon. You're in this for the long haul. So if you do too much too soon, you're going to be able to get away with it for a period of time, but then you're going to fatigue. So we want to think about increasing that load as we need to. So as choir concerts are coming up, as audition season is coming into play, you're going to ramp up your load slightly. But if we're already in that practice routine, it becomes a little bit easier. Also, from a pacing standpoint, if you have a high school singer that sings in their high school choir, they sing in their show choir, they take private lessons, they're singing all the time at home, that's going to be too much load for this voice over the period of time. And they're doing their high school musical and they're singing in their church choir. Those are all the things that we see leading up to potential vocal issues. So when we talk about pacing themselves, we want to think about, if you have a long vocal day, how much are you going to sing in choir? How much are you going to sing in your lesson? Because you need to pace this for the long haul. So you may not sing full out for the whole 30, 60, 90-minute choir session. Or if they're doing choreography, you can't carry your section vocally just because you're the strongest voice. And this becomes really hard for singers to understand, because they do this because they love it. Part of it is they want some of the attention vocally that they get. So them stepping back takes some self-reflection. And even day to day, most of these folks are vocally enthusiastic people. So they're talking a lot, they're talking loudly, they like to be the center of attention. You want to think about teaching them their daily speaking volume should be about an arm's length distance loudness. So you want to think about them talking as if somebody's about an arm's length distance to them away. That is softer than most of them talk on a regular basis. Most of them are vocally enthusiastic people. You also want to encourage them to take vocal naps during the day. So if they have 5 or 10 minutes to be quiet during their day, have them do that. And that means hallways in school is not a time to be chatting. Hopefully they're not talking excessively during class. Also, lunchrooms tend to be excessively noisy. So those types of situations, I want you to think about helping them find strategies where they can vocally pace themselves. When we move into the collegiate level of singer, the thing that ramps up for a lot of people going from high school to college is the amount of singing that you have to do. Private lessons, coachings, choral, opera, music theater, auditions, other people's shows, meeting new people for the first time, being in this very highly competitive environment where you are not the best singer anymore. Everyone there is the best singer. And so you are now all competing for the same jobs at a very high level. So learning to vocally pace at college is slightly different than high school, but hopefully the high school students will have developed this skill set. Learning how to go into a practice room and practice smart, so that when you are there, you are practicing technique. You can learn your rhythms and your text outside of having to just sing through rep over and over again. When you are getting the rep in your vocal instrument, that you can do it on a semi-occluded vocal track. You can do it with lip buzzes or tongue trills, so that you are not learning and integrating text, rhythms, and tonality all at the same time. You are breaking it apart, which is a much smarter way to practice. If you are singing high and loud for a period of time, you need to counterbalance that with low and soft, so that you're cross-training that instrument throughout. And that becomes really, really important from a singing standpoint through college, is that you get tracked in a role or you get tracked in a voice type, but you need to make sure you balance that voice out on your own on a daily basis. Similarly, you need to think about helping them take days of vocal rest. Where are their lighter vocal days, and how do they manage that throughout? When they come into heavy choral season, audition season, and performance season, pacing them through their tech week becomes really, really important, that they're not singing at 110% when they're learning to adjust to costumes, lighting, moving set pieces. Not that I don't want them to sing, but they need to have ramped up this pace so that they are able to do that. And specifically during their tech week, when they are working on all of those other things, that maybe they're singing at 80%, so that when they go into performance, they're at 110%. Think about this as vocally tapering the week before a marathon. We don't train at 100% that week before we exercise at the marathon level. We actually taper. Our training has occurred actually the 8 to 15 weeks prior to us doing the marathon. so that you have time to let your body recover, integrate that muscle memory so that you're performing at maximum when you're doing your marathon. Those are some of the biggest things we see with our collegiate performers, and just because they're meeting new people all the time, they are vocally topping people. We also have the stress component that comes into play with these collegiate level singers, where they're dealing with stresses that they may have never dealt with before, and helping them understand how much stress can impact the voice. That's really a discussion for another time. But as their teacher, getting them to counselors to help them manage their stress, understanding that stress is a part of life that they need to learn to manage and or get help for, depending on what's causing the stress early on, because it will absolutely impact their vocal performance. When we talk about our teachers, especially vocal teachers, have huge vocal demands. They're expected to be in good vocal shape for demonstrating for their students. They also may have their own performance demands, which becomes very difficult when you're teaching 8 hours a day to be in your optimal vocal shape to be able to perform at an elite level. That's nearly impossible to do when you're literally talking or singing 8 hours a day, that you are at the same vocal shape you were when your only job was to be able to just sing and practice, because now you're responsible for talking and teaching all day long too. And then we have the problem that sometimes as singing teachers, we tend to embody, because we are feeling people, we embody some of the vocal problems that our singers are presenting with in the studio. So if they present with a lot of vocal tension, you'll find that by the end of your day, you feel vocally tense, even if you haven't done a lot of singing. So one of the things I will say for my teachers through the semester is pace yourself vocally. Make sure that you spend time each day warming up and cooling down your own voice, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes. That when you create your vocal schedule, that you are able to take vocal naps in your own day and reset your voice and your mental capacity for your day. That if you know you have a performance or a concert coming up, you may have to consider how your schedule looks, because if you need to be at an elite performing level, talking and singing for 8 hours during the day and then expecting to go into a dress rehearsal for an hour to an hour and a half and perform at a high level, and you get frustrated because it is not at the level you're expecting it to be, despite your typical warm-ups, your preparation for the role or for the performance. Basically what's happening is you're getting some fatigue during the day that you may need to cut back on just those days of performance or dress rehearsals so that you reschedule some of those lessons or times, especially if you have to perform at that really high level. Those are some of the things that we see in collegiate level performers. One of the things that I think that everybody can do across the board, whether you teach high school or college or privately, is that within your studio at the beginning of each semester or the beginning of each year, that you create a vocal wellness contract between you and each of your students, that you have them sign, and each one may be slightly different. So you want to think about what the parameters are in your studio that are very important. Is it they don't smoke? Is it that they're drinking enough water? Is that they understand how to practice, how you want them to practice, whether or not they keep vocal logs. In this day and age, it's incredibly easy to take an iPhone and literally create a practice schedule so that you know that they've practiced. If you question whether they're practicing correctly, have them record on their iPhone or their recording device for 2 minutes. Okay, let me hear your warm-ups 2 days this week. You can have them upload that into a Dropbox or a Google Drive so that you can actually listen to how they're practicing to make sure that what you're sending them home with is actually what they're practicing. But I would encourage you to have a little vocal wellness contract that each student sign so that you can make sure that these students are well aware of what your policies are. And as teachers, you want to make sure that in your studio, they're adhering to that vocal wellness policy, because we know that as the school year goes on and life happens, that it's going to be more difficult to adhere to those policies. So you can bring that back up, say post this near your piano, post this near your practice time. These are my expectations of you to keep you vocally well now and for the future. So if you have any questions about vocal wellness, please let us know. But it's my pleasure to talk to you and be your vocal wellness coordinator for NATS, and I look forward to seeing you next month.